now I would like to introduce Christina. But before I start, I had a quick question for you, Christina, and you can answer that when you introduce yourself. But picking the name Carnelian Connection, I don't know, it's probably very hard to see. I have a bottle of Carnelian stones here. It says it's a semi-precious gemstone, gives you strength, courage, security, and the ability to overcome fear. I assume that's probably consistent with the theme of you establishing your company. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the questions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, BJ. It is consistent. In the realm of Eastern wisdom traditions, there's a lot of use of the elements in nature, and stones are one of those things. And I was always really skeptical about that in the beginning, but then there was this one time where I came across my favorite stone, which happened to be carnelian. It's thought of as the warrior stone, and it helps to center somebody in their inner power, especially for meditative activities, but also physical and expressive activities. So when I decided to start my business, it just felt very aligned.
Yeah.
And that's why I chose it.
Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started? And oh, by the way, folks, I'm BJ Belloc. I'm one of the founding members here, but I think probably everybody knows that already. Go ahead, Christina.
Oh, well, my name is Christina Dufour. I run a company that supports organizations in increasing job satisfaction, improving retention rates, and lowering the costs that stress can incur on an organization, but tied to the business itself. And it's essentially helping people find more enjoyment in what they're doing, thriving in their work, and bringing the best self to their work while also learning to lead from their center.
Very good. Quite interesting. And for everybody on the call, Rob Atkinson is listening in. Unfortunately, he was supposed to moderate today, but he's under the weather with a fever. So hope you feel better, Rob. So Christina, you recently did one of our main ideas, and in it, you basically said that companies lose an estimated $300 billion annually, potentially more, due to stress-related absenteeism, reduced productivity, and turnover. You said larger companies spend more than $2 million per year on wellness programs, while smaller companies spend up to $4 per employee. So, how does your program and programs like yours help to address and mitigate these costs?
Uh, well, nobody wants to spend money without getting a return on their investment, right? Especially in business. And 2 million is a lot to spend on wellness programs, particularly if you're not seeing results. And my programs are designed to create results that can be seen in the business. So whether it's changes in employee morale, more positive communication, leaders engaging in more empowering ways with their teams through enhanced awareness, teams functioning more cohesively, people having more resistance for the specific challenges they face in their role, or people in general bringing more energy to the workplace, sharing creative ideas more freely. In my opinion, many of the wellness programs that are out there don't really tie into the business that specifically. And I believe that wellness programs need to be connected to the workplace so that people can learn to engage with the pressures of their work in a way that leads to a higher job satisfaction and more engagement. Tools that help them maintain a regulated state under pressure so that they can stay out of burnout and chronic stress is something that's more proactive, right? And a proactive approach like that tied to specific industry and workplace pressures, it can not only lower the cost of stress, but you can actually get a return on the money that you're spending to address that stress.
My background is in trading fixed income securities for a long time. And I know from a lot of my colleagues who burned out, stressed out. Their approach to it was alcohol or cannabis. And of course, that's counterproductive. You know, that doesn't help them improve, but they seem to want to numb themselves to all the stress, which a lot of times folks would call in sick or come in hungover and just not performing up to capacity. So you have a business finance background and banking. How did you end up transitioning from that into what you're doing now?
Uh, sure. Let me just touch on what you're saying about substance use and this sort of thing. So we do find that that shows up a lot in the statistics around stress in different industries. The work I do, though, it's not therapy. The main thing, and we stay kind of out of those realms. People can find their ways to go further to support themselves there. The main thing is that we're teaching people with my programs things that they never learned. So it's as simple as you're going to go into this company or into this industry, and you're going to face specific pressures here doing the work that you're doing. And we want to be able to talk about those pressures and then give you some tools to understand what's happening inside of yourself that's creating stress around interaction or engagement with those workplace pressures, and some tools to better manage that so you can have a more positive experience. And hopefully that would lead people to less coping mechanisms such as substance use or other things. But the programs don't go that far, even though we see them there. It's just a way for a company to really take good care of their folks on a foundational level. And I think my experience in business, transitioning into this really helped me in creating the programs the way that I have. Not only because I eventually ended up working in a few different industries, one industry where we had folks of many different cultures from all around the world who related and communicated in unique ways and led in unique ways. And then also in some organizations, I was partaking in strategic leadership meetings and conversations. I was managing teams and making those tough decisions in some roles, doing business development, pushing myself beyond my boundaries and limits, and noticing a lot of what makes a business function. Learning a lot about different leadership styles by being led by different people and trying different leadership tactics in my own management, and utilizing all of those skills. Then in the background of all of that, I was studying all these Eastern wisdom traditions that I never really intended to teach. I just had a great passion for it and kept on going further and deeper, and started kind of recognizing my mind just how this could help in any industry, and help leaders, help teams. And so putting those two passions together and blending the expertise in both, it just kind of lent itself to my approaches becoming very business centric, taking in mind the needs of a strategy and a leadership team, but also the needs of individuals on the front lines. And yeah, so I think those two experiences kind of just ended up coming together organically.
Makes a lot of sense. So I would recommend that everybody, if you go onto LinkedIn and look up Christina, she's got a lot of certifications across the spectrum. And I would assume that, I guess the wisdom traditions you mentioned, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and so forth. So you're blending all of that and bringing it into a business from a business ROI perspective, yes?
So the interesting thing that I believe isn't really talked about a lot in around these traditions is that when they're taught by the most ancient teachers, they talk about how these practices are meant to regulate your nervous system. So they really discuss that, and they talk about what scientifically the practice is doing at that level. You can have all these certifications. What really made the difference was my own personal practice and just how much I personally engaged with these practices myself, which really helped me understand what they do for people. And so when I bring these into a program, a lot of it is actually the philosophies, perspectives, mindsets behind the traditions that informs how I create a program that can take somebody who has zero connection to this, totally connect it to their work and talk about the specific things they're facing, and then add in a tool from one of these practices that fits. And that helps somebody kind of have a new experience. And then they can also learn, how to develop a greater capacity by taking a different specific tool and using it for a regular practice that can actually change the brain. So that's the difference between, if you go on meditation apps and you're just kind of bouncing around trying different practices, many of those techniques aren't, the techniques of actual self-mastery or, part of those systems. Those are systems, and they do and can change the brain, change our physiology, change our nervous system functioning. But if you're bouncing around and trying all these different practices made by all these different teachers, you don't actually create that change. So I try to create a systematic approach in any program that I teach that teaches somebody how to, they get awareness of what's actually occurring inside in regard to the pressures of my work, and utilize that awareness to understand what tool to use to then regulate in the moment on the job with that pressure, have a different experience with that pressure. And then the process itself may inspire them to then take a secondary step and try a practice more consistently on their own to develop a higher capacity of their brain to not trigger into stress so readily. And so it's all very connected to their work, but it takes into respect the understandings of those philosophies on how to get actual results.
Okay, so we titled this "Boosting Performance and Engagement with a Twist on Wellness." Is that the twist? You're bringing all these together systematically? Is that the twist? And is that what I'm getting out of this, or not?
Actually, no, the twist is that it's about business. So, for instance, a common pressure that people face is my to-do list never ends. It's always getting added
Yeah.
to.
Oh,
And
yeah.
every time I get something off, something new comes on, and there's all these different priorities in there. And right, I can go on and on about this. And so the way that I tailor my programs is that we're speaking about those specific stressors, and then helping you not only have awareness of what's happening in your system, whether you're going into, let's say, a fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or faint response in your nervous system, and then just to understand from that science and that awareness what tool may be the best tool to help you regulate when you notice that's a response or reaction is occurring in your body, and you can get yourself back into balance and have a different experience and deplete less energy,
Right.
or you could say maintain your energy more readily even among the stressors of the work. And that's really the twist. And so in varying industries you have varying pressures, right? A nurse, one of their pressures is facing death and dying, and so the tools and the awareness for that is a bit different than somebody who's working in an office, or facing pressures around the volatility in the market, or somebody in construction who's facing pressures in the volatility of the weather that's changing what's going on in their projects. So the twist is how can we be that specific and connected to business so we can actually help people have a different experience on the job, and maybe work could become fun again.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and it's good you touch on the market volatility because I'm sure there are a lot of folks out there stressing, especially today with what's going on overseas. Another question here. Oh, and folks, by the way, you can ask questions if you want through the Q&A function, not the chat function. So if you have any, just put them in there and I'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. So I wrote down here, or somebody's written down here for me, what's the difference between a reactive wellness initiative, like a meditation app or a nutrition course or wellness day, and the kind of proactive readiness system you're advocating for?
Great. Reactive programs are programs that essentially support somebody when they're already in some level of a crisis. So most EAP programs are set up to do that. You're burned out or you have a mental health crisis or substance use issue. You can go to your EAP resources and be supported there. There are some resources that can be accessed there. I just found that many companies say that they don't get a lot of engagement with that. Uh, when you're looking at meditation apps or nutrition courses or wellness fairs, again, you may be giving people resources, but often these resources are resources they can get anywhere. And nowadays I can go on YouTube or, even a social media platform and get tons of information on nutrition. You can, in your wellness fairs, there's often, creating more awareness around those EAP programs, showing people that they're supported, that here's some information so that you can take better care of yourself, this sort of thing. But none of it is really tied to the work. So, in my opinion, proactive resources are resources that help people develop the skills to not get into those states. And what I think is really necessary in business is that it is tied to business, because when it's not, many employees, in my experience, if there is a nutrition course or a meditation opportunity at my workplace, or I can go partake in that physical trainer program. Well, I have a lot of stuff on my to-do list. I'm sitting here on the job getting paid to work. None of that is tied to my business. My work, I don't know if I want my boss to see me doing that. Is it really okay? There's a lot of things that come up for people around engaging in something that's not connected to work. And then the company can't make it mandatory because it's wellness in that sense. However, if you're making your proactive program connected to the workplace itself and the specific stressors people are facing, then you can certainly make it something that is part of their training to engage in. You could even make it part of an orientation program. It's completely business centric, it's proactive, and it's actually helping people reduce the stress that they're facing on the job. So it's much more likely to have an effect that will actually, be proactive, meaning less people will need those reactive programs.
Right. Well, that kind of leads into the next question, and I would preface that with a statement that I've heard over the years, and it's that a true friend will see the stress in your eyes while the rest of the world buys the smile on your face. And the question here is, what are the signs for an organization or a leader or an individual who's operating below their real performance capacity, even if they look fine? Again, they're buying the smile on your face when we all know we all come to work. We all have issues, whether it's work related or not. So how do you identify those signs?
Mm-hmm. So, first thing is somebody walks into a room and they're a ball of light. You feel that. You feel that. Somebody walks into the room and it's heavy. You feel that. So, one of the things I really appreciate about this work is that it helps us trust those instincts. It helps us trust our deeper sensory faculties.
The intuition.
Yeah. And so there's that. And then also, other what could be considered perhaps more tangible signs, right? Is um, however somebody you've seen consistently show up is all of a sudden showing up quite differently. That's a sign. Somebody who's irritable, quick to anger or lashing out. That's a sign. Somebody who's shutting down a lot, really kind of closing off, not communicating as much. That's a sign. Anytime you see a lapse in ability to kind of be grounded and connected, that's a sign. And of course, there's a lot of other physical factors, but those may go unseen, right? If somebody's lacking sleep or, missing lunches, uh, overworking, and you kind of notice when you ask them about it, they're not open to connect. Maybe they're not sharing their ideas as much on the job, or they're not showing up as much, taking more days off, or complaining a lot. When it kind of the overwhelm gets too much, they might start complaining, whether it's kind of water cooler behind the scenes or it's just in general more with the team. But those intuitive faculties I mentioned in the beginning, as a leader, you can trust those. You have a sense of how people are, and there's wisdom in that.
Yeah, well, I would agree completely. So, moving on to the next question, again, referring back to the article you put on the main idea, you noted that 77% of workers in the US experience burnout at their current job. And I know we've all experienced that. There's a sharp rise from pre-pandemic levels. Burnout has become such a buzzword. Is what you're addressing the same thing as burnout or something different?
My goal is to help people stay out of that realm, by giving them awareness and tools to be empowered to make better choices for themselves. If we have more awareness around what is draining our energy and depleting us, and we have a capacity to develop awareness around what can replenish our energy, what can restore us, then we can start to make better choices in alignment with that. Either when we notice our energy is becoming depleted, we can make a choice to do an activity that replenishes it. And like meditations are phenomenal for that. That's essentially what they do. They take scattered, stressed, disorganized energy in your system, and they have the ability through the use of different specific techniques to create more coherence in the energy body in the system. And that shows up in your thoughts or quality of mind, in your body, in the physical structure, and in the quality of your breath and nervous system and that sort of thing. Or, you can really pay attention to what's draining you and start to eliminate some of the things that are draining if possible, or change the way you look at them and have a different experience with them. And if that's not possible, and this is true for all of us, I believe, we just have things that drain us,
Mhm.
sitting and staring at a computer for however many hours a day is going to drain your energy. It's going to use up resources that you have for that day and your mind body. Same with meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting with no break. That is going to deplete you in some way. And you might notice that as I have zero energy, or my energy is all over the place. I'm restless. I have all this, I'm going, 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 which is not homeostasis. It's not balance, right?
Yeah.
And so in that case, we want to make sure that we have replenishing moments in activities in our day to support us with that, either to notice that that state is occurring and regulate ourselves right then, or to have a replenishing activity at the end of the workday to be able to ground and clear and go into our evening perhaps with less stress.
Yeah.
And then we'll have better sleep, better connections at home, all of that.
So, this next bit of information you provided. You say globally only 21% of employees are engaged at work. Relating that to the financial industry, you know, we all are very high energy usually, you know, on just a normal day because we have to be. The markets are moving. It doesn't matter whether you're trading, managing a portfolio, or working in the middle, back, or front office. Doesn't matter. You're still impacted by the volatility in the markets and also the volatility in the news, and you get it all fed to you by your phone, your laptop, your colleagues, whatever it is. And I guess, you know, engaged, we are engaged, but we're on that roller coaster. You know, some days it's worse than others. Um, how do you improve the engagement in a healthy way as opposed to, you know, just being focused? I know, you know, when I used to trade in the international markets and something would happen, you had to focus on five or six things. I had to listen to the foreign exchange market, the equity markets, all back and forth, and it didn't matter. The accounting department had to keep track of everything too, and that was stressful for them. So it doesn't matter where you are in the process, it's very stressful. So
Mhm.
tell us, how do you handle that?
Sure, sure. Let's keep it specific to finance. Um, Remember I said sometime earlier, we were never taught this stuff. This is precisely what I mean. You went to school, you learned everything around finance and what you need to do, the skills to do your job well, skills to, make decisions under a volatile market, or the skills to navigate the data, the spreadsheets, everything, right? But you didn't learn, correct me if I'm wrong, that the environment itself and the nature of being in this environment every day would naturally kind of speed up your nervous system, and that physiology inside of you, and that multitasking and just the nature of what you have to do to keep up in that environment was going to kind of put everything in a very highly active state inside of you, so that when you go home at night and try to lay down, your mind is racing, right? Or everything inside of you is kind of always active. You see a lot of people in finance who are go, 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 go. That's not natural. So could you do that? Absolutely. Is that going to support your longevity? No.
You
So
know,
what
if
you
I could
could,
interrupt you real
yeah.
quick, with the go, 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 I worked with a guy quite a few years ago, and he would stress out all the time, and he'd have highs and lows. And
Mhm.
one day, we're out on the desk, you know, and there are a couple hundred people out on the trading floor, and I needed to ask him a question relative to a trade we were working on, but all hell was breaking loose. And I went over and I put my hand on his shoulder, and he jumped and screamed, and everybody on the floor stopped. You know, and it was like he wasn't processing properly at that point. He was somewhere deep in doo doo, I guess. I don't know, you know, but everybody jumped when he jumped. You could
Mhm.
just cut it with a knife, as they say metaphorically.
Yeah. Well, the hyperarousal state of the nervous system, like that is, it's always scanning for threat. It's a protective mechanism in the system. So the skill is to understand, I have control. This system is going to completely run me unless I take control of it. And I can absolutely take control of it. The environment may never be conducive for, let's say, homeostasis, like always being in complete balance, but I can find a way to slow down and have much more equanimity and still get my work done and still be effective, and possibly even make better choices, make better connections, communicate more effectively, have more of a healthy culture among my team. So, and that's what it would take. It would take, first of all, understanding the science of what's happening, just so you could have a clear view of the responses that are occurring physiologically, so that, it's not you. There's nothing wrong with you. This is the natural response of your nervous system to this environment and engaging in these activities on a regular basis. And, having the goals you have and the perception you have, and the needs and attachments around all of that, that's natural. Once you understand the science of how that works, it's naturally going to expand your awareness. You're going to notice right away, oh, that happens to me. I experience that in my nervous system. Okay. And then you can take that awareness, if you so choose, and decide to slow down a little bit so that you can become more aware in the moment. Easiest way I can suggest to slow down is to use your breath. There are three things that directly impact getting into a more parasympathetic nervous system state. We can look at those simply as breath, physical posture, and quality of mind. Breath is an easy one, right? If you want to kind of slow things down, all you have to do is slow your exhale down, make your exhale longer. It's as simple as that. So if you notice everything's getting really worked up, restless, you're on edge, you're perhaps irritable or easy to be frightened, or your mind is racing, or any of these things, you can just start to extend your exhale. You can do that in and out through your nose, or you can blow out through your mouth, and do it until you actually feel your physiology following and coming down and grounding.
Working on me right now.
Yeah. And once you find that, just bring that state to what you're doing. And then when you start getting really good at, oh, my nervous system is taking me here, I'm going to use it. I'm going to come back to my center. And then I'm going to bring my center, lead from my center into this work. Eventually, the body and nervous system will start to see that as the habit. Because this was never learned, never taught, it was never made a habitual way to, function in a work environment. But
So
you
that
can
becomes
start to do that.
that becomes the response to the trigger.
Eventually, I mean, it takes repeated, practice and consistency, and a willingness to actually really shift your state and
Right.
bring that new state, bring that new centered, grounded place to everything you're doing. And you start to notice, wow, I can do all that I was doing before. Sometimes I can do more, and I can stay well and healthy and not deplete my energy, or, I can get good sleep at night. I can engage better with the people around me. It can be very, very fulfilling, not only because it's empowering to be able to work with yourself and know yourself in that way, but because people around you start to notice, and they tell you, and you notice that you're engaging differently. And so it can be very, very fulfilling.
Okay, so noticing. Um, I'm going to rephrase this question. There's a lot of skepticism, in the corporate world, and I guess what you call the soft territory sounds like therapy. And the question was, how do you bring leaders along to understand this? But let's flip that over a little bit. Give us an example of what an unbeliever was resisting and how you brought them over, and what the outcome was. So you've got a corporate leader, whether it's a CEO, CFO, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in this stuff. It doesn't work. How do you get them over that line? And where is the proof to them?
Sure. Well, remember, I said very early on, I was very skeptical, not just about the carnelian, the stones, all of that, the whole thing. But I was surprised in my journey, the experiences I was having over time, and I couldn't deny the effect that it was having on me. So I know that through my own experience. And I also believe I can't make or help anybody get over the hump. Everybody does everything for themselves. And now they'll look and they'll say, yeah, but if it weren't for you, no, no, no. They did the work. They got where they got. And that's the nature of this work. So I help them if I'm working with somebody one-on-one, I can intuitively assess about where they're at. And I meet them where they're at and I share information, knowledge based off of science, based off of things that are easy to relate to, easy to understand, easy to digest. And, I give them tools that are short, easy to try out, easy to have a good experience with. I know that it's going to make an impactful difference for them. Once they do that and they have an impact, they want more. And we just keep going and we can get varying results based upon their goals, their needs, what they actually want to develop, and specifically for their work and in their relationship to that. So that would vary, obviously, based on presentation skills or communication leadership or scaling a company, right? In the programs for organizations, I just make the straight up assumption that, there is some aversion to this sort of work and that perhaps anybody coming into this may have had zero experience. So again, I start from that place. It's based on science. You'll learn the science. You'll be like, whoa, that's easy to get. And that's how it works. And I can see that in me. And wow. And I can change that. Let me try these really simple tools to, see what happens. And whoa, it actually did make an effect. And I had a change and a different experience. Okay, let's keep going. And oh, it's every time I'm having a better, a new experience with my work, with something that matters to me. And then it just kind of compounds on itself. That's one of the things I really love about it. So the more you start small, step by step, everything is integrated in science, everything is grounded, you're having these experiences, and over time it just compounds. It becomes less subtle, it becomes more tangible. You can actually affect change in a much easier way. You can understand what's going on inside of you in an easier way. So that's kind of my process in terms of how I might take somebody or a team into, from where they are to a new place, and they take themselves.
So let me put this together in a slightly different way. So you have a leader who is skeptical to begin with. They see some outcomes, they start to buy into it. And you talked before about people with their intuition and picking up, the nonverbal cues from people or verbal cues. I've led teams before in the past, and I've had to be very careful about what I was projecting physically. And the reason I had to be careful is I've had lower back surgery. Sometimes my back will spasm and people will misread what's going on inside me because I'm just trying to suppress the cramping or the pain or whatever it is, and stay present. So how do you coach the leaders then to make sure that they're transmitting the right message once they have buy-in?
So what you're describing can be slightly complex, depending upon different things that are occurring. The simplest answer I could give is that, in a leadership role, if you're noticing some changes in your team, one of the things that we would teach around that is to not make assumptions. So, trust your senses. Trust that maybe you're sensing something is going on, but don't just necessarily jump to a conclusion. Learn to have a conversation. Ask the person what's going on. We have different strategies to communicate in those ways, different ways to ask the questions. And it's not so much about having, a lot of leadership trainings and coaching is around tactics, right? I'm going to tell you this exact way to say this thing and how to, But what I think is amazing about this work is when you are regulated in your nervous system and you are coming from that grounded, centered place, not only can you access those tactics if you have them, in your toolkit there, much more readily, but often you can act a bit more intuitively. So you can kind of ask these questions in a way that feels right to you in relationship to that person and how you know them.
Yeah,
And
that if I can interrupt,
yeah.
that's what I found is I would be picking up on some of the direct reports, getting a little bit stressed at whatever it was that I was stressing over in my back, and simply asking the question a few times, I realized, oh, when I have, a little pain or whatever, I have to be careful and make sure. And that's why I'll tell some people sometimes my back is bothering me a little bit, just ignore it. Because you'll see me moving around in my seat a lot if I sit for too long. So, some people will say, oh, your shoulders are forward, you're closed off, or whatever. No, it's just that I'm trying to get in a position to get through it. And I think that's great advice, is not to assume what other people are thinking about what you're doing. Just discuss it. So that then leads, from the soft to the hard. Um, the hard evidence, let's see, your program was used in a peer-reviewed study with Columbia University that showed measurable outcomes, which we all like, clinical reductions in depression and anxiety, and improved job satisfaction. What did that research validate for you that maybe you already knew intuitively?
I knew these programs could impact people positively. I knew that they were reducing stress. I knew that they were improving confidence and job satisfaction. But case studies, you can only really, when you do a case study, you're creating surveys before, after, in the middle for your programs, and people are answering these questions. It's very perception based. It's not rigorous, and it's not using necessarily validated surveys like Columbia does or like a university does in a peer-reviewed study. So I couldn't get clinical measures on my own, but through that Columbia study, it was amazing to see it validated clinically lowered depression and anxiety. Yes. Like that, we're talking about proactive wellness. And this was a completely it was a business based course specific to these folks in the workplace and helping them with stress management and resilience in their specific job, which happened to be nurses, which is one of the most stressful jobs. So if it could work for them, as long as it's tailored to the industry, can work there. And then I loved that we increased job satisfaction because retention is a huge issue in healthcare. And to have measurements from a study like this that proved, we're improving job satisfaction, we're decreasing intention to leave the job. Yes, this is what I mean about getting results for the business as well as the individual. That's what we're seeking to do. And just the fact that it was at that level. It's at a peer-reviewed, published, study from Columbia versus just a case study. That was just amazing. The other thing it validated for me, BJ, was that was the first time I made a program that was completely virtual. And I was testing that out. What would happen? Because usually it's me. I'm there, I'm teaching in person, and it might be virtual in the sense of Zoom or something like that. But never, this program on a platform where I'm just in a video and I'm in the guided recordings you're listening to. So that was the other thing. When Columbia decided to use this program, I had created it for a different study. And that study got really great results at Wisconsin School of Nursing. And then Columbia went to use that for this study. And I was doing this during the pandemic, seeing how I could, support nurses and healthcare workers and do it completely virtually. So I knew my work got really great results in person, but then to see I could have this course where people don't necessarily even engage with me live, and we're still getting these amazing results out of it for the business, for the individual. Yes, because now we can scale it, right? Now we can, a company, instead of buying into an app where people are maybe not even using it or doing whatever, they could, pay almost the same amount of money and have their employees go through this program, and it's completely tied into their business and their industry and the pressures that they're going to face. It changes the way they work, changes the nature of the culture at work, all of that, which is phenomenal and exciting.
So let's take that one step further then. So for somebody listening, whether right now live or when they go and look at this recording later on, um, how do people reach out to either somebody like you or one of your peers in the industry and get the information they need to decide, does this work for me? Should I speak with somebody? Should I speak with Christina? What do they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any other wellness company out there who's doing what I'm doing. I'd be happy to have a conversation with anybody who wants to learn more or talk about how it might be a good fit for their company or their industry, and just have a conversation. I mean, that's generally how it works when I meet folks. And, we see what makes sense and if it makes sense. And it's okay if it doesn't.
Okay. And then is there a difference? Um, and let's break it down: male, female, younger, older, different cultures. How does that all work? How do you support different groups, and especially the male female dynamic? Because I know, years ago, the way things would go out on a trading desk have changed dramatically over the years. The things that were laughed at years ago are now considered harassment and abuse, which it was then, but it was just viewed differently. So how do you approach that?
This program, if we were to take the virtual program, for instance, that could be a great supplement to a company's onboarding. Just like, the sexual harassment training and the other trainings and everything that have come in light of, the negative things that are occurring in the business and trying to overcome those, we've provided trainings for that. I see a wellness training just like the one I created for the Columbia study, going into different companies and being a part of that onboarding process. And not only do I think that that would support, keeping people out of burnout and having a better, more positive experience on the job with the pressures that they're facing on the job, but I think it would support many of the other things that are occurring, because not only is it helping you keep your nervous system regulated, which will help you be honest and share your voice. It'll help you speak your boundaries more clearly. It'll help you speak up if you're seeing something that feels unsafe, but it'll also more likely keep people out of behaviors that create that level of disconnect. So, it promotes awareness in a way that I think supports lessening those other things you're talking about happening in the environment. I do have some programs actually that are mostly offered in private equity, specifically for organizations and women in those organizations. And, in those scenarios, we're working with helping women find empowerment in expressing and sharing their voice and bringing their full presence to the table. And just overcoming some of the societal perceptual barriers to that, just by stepping out of that old framework, that old box and way of thinking, stepping into a new reality and just deciding to show up with more presence and connection and a sense of freedom of expression and creativity in stepping forward. And that's what I like to help women do in that space so they can just be themselves and bring what they have to the workplace and feel good about that, not having to fight the constructs of everything that is against them because they're hanging on to that.
Um, so we're getting close to the end of the hour, and this was great so far, as always. So, can you just kind of put it all together from beginning to end in a summary, and then we'll give people your contact information. So if anybody wants to reach out, they know how to get a hold of you.
Sure. So if you're thinking that it may be helpful for your organization to improve job satisfaction, retention rates, to support people to engage um, in a proactive, wellness based way to the pressures of the workplace. And to give them tools to empower them to have a better experience on the job so you can enhance that engagement and help people stay out of burnout. And if you want your wellness programs to specifically speak to the business and what's going on with the business itself, then we should have a conversation and we can talk about your company, your industry, the roles and the pressures that people are facing there. And we can talk about what might be a good fit for you at that time. Um, and in which case we would take it from there. And otherwise, we can just have a conversation. And I'm happy to give people pointers on what they might be able to do to make positive little changes where they can as well. And you can find me through my website, carnelianconnection.com.
Consistent with what I said at the beginning, we're trying to help support the industry, especially the smaller, the startup, and the growing firms. And we're trying to do it holistically. So, one of the components, of course, is the human factor. And Christina has addressed that very effectively today. As she said, she's been peer reviewed by Columbia University, and it's critical. We're all very stressed all the time in this industry, and the resources she brings to bear will hopefully give folks the tools they need. And as she said, you need to be proactive and reach out, and you need to engage and utilize those tools.